Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Enrique, and I am a software engineer. I work at One Medical, and One Medical is a healthcare company, but they also have an engineering team, and the engineering team is in charge of building software that improves the relationship between patients and providers, and it also builds software for the medical doctors. I've been a software engineer for around 10 years now, and I work in Spain, in Mexico, and here in the US. I work in small companies, medium companies. I work in consulting companies and product companies. So I have some experience giving and receiving feedback. I want to ask you, how often do you get a good code review? How often do you get a good code review? Today, I want to convince you that positive feedback is a very powerful tool to collaborate and build better software. Let's start with a definition. What is feedback? According to the internet, feedback is a reaction or response to a particular process or activity or information that is produced. I think this is an okay definition, but I like this definition better. It's a definition from electronics. Oops. Feedback is the process of returning part of the output of a system, of a circuit, device, or input back to the input of the system. And allow me to explain that. There is this system that generates an output. And then there is a process that takes that output and then analyzes or does something. This is what we call feedback. And there's something that comes out from that feedback, and you put it back into the system, covering the circle. And an amazing coincidence is that in electronics, when you inject positive feedback, the system will expand. But when you inject negative feedback, the system will contract. And I'm saying that is an amazing coincidence because it's the same thing that happens with collaboration. If you are in a positive environment of collaboration, collaboration will be easier. Collaboration will be something that you do every day. But if there is negative feedback, collaboration will be harder. And allow me to share a story of one of those occasions where I got negative feedback. This happened to me while I was working as a consultant from Mexico, and I was working remotely for a company here in the US. It was my first week, and I was going to have one of my first code reviews. Back then, we were not using GitHub, so our code reviews were mostly talking about code. I was there in a small conference room. On the phone, it was my manager and my team lead. And one other thing to say about my team lead is he is one of those persons who usually comes a little bit confident, and he's just one of those guys who has the answer to every problem right away. Anyway, I was listening carefully, and suddenly he says, there are two ways to do this. There is the right way and the stupid way. And this is not the right way. So the first thing that I thought is, hey, is he telling me stupid? Is he telling my code is stupid? Yes, he gave me honest feedback. But it was hard to accept because it didn't allow me to grow as an engineer. It didn't add anything to the project, and it didn't point me to the real issue. In the end, we figured out a solution. But the truth is that it took us a little bit more because I was not willing to ask a direct question because of his negative feedback. I think that it would have been an entire different conversation if he had asked me something like, why did you do this? Or do you think it would be better to approach this in a different situation? I think that if he had helped me to identify the issue and allow me to learn, I think we would be having a different conversation right now. Why I think positive feedback is important because it enables communications. So in a positive feedback environment, people are more likely to ask questions. People are more likely to take risks. And actually, in a positive feedback environment, if you're in sales, you are 37% more likely to make a sale. But if you're in a pair programming session, you are 30% more likely to convince your pair that you break the rules. Another reason why positive feedback is important is because it makes you feel good. And when you feel good, it has been proven that you perform better. Actually, you perform 31% better. And one of the reasons I think you perform better is because it makes you feel confident. Actually, it has been proven, there are studies that prove that doctors in a positive feedback environment, they take 19% better decisions. One other reason why positive feedback is important is because it opens your mind. As soon as you get negative feedback, you start rejecting new ideas. But on the other hand, if you receive positive feedback, you're more likely to take those new ideas. So positive feedback is important because it enables communications, opens your mind, makes you feel good, and it inspires confidence. But what is positivity? Positivity is the quality of having a positive attitude. And I'm going to use a tool to allow me to describe positivity a little bit more. How many of you have heard about sentiment analysis? All right, so I participated in a Rails Rumble project, and this project, we analyzed comments on pull requests, and we tried to find out if the comments were positive or negative, and if that affected the outcome of the pull request. And I'm going to give you an example, and this baseline is actually the comment that my peer told me. And as you can see, it's a negative comment, especially because it includes the word stupid, and it has a negative score. But I also want to give you a positive example, because people have been using positive sentiment analysis to analyze any kind of text. This is a tweet. And as you can see, the score is very high, especially because he's using 3 positive words. So the positive attitudes that I was talking about are joy, interest, gratitude, and there are many others. But today, I'm going to focus on this. When you feel joyful, you feel lucky, you feel fortunate, you feel energized, enthusiastic. And this is the level of energy that you want to be to get things done. So for example, here, Andre Arco, Interact, he's using a word that describes joy, lovely, in one comment on a pull request. So he's just showing joy. All right, the next one is interest. When you show interest, it's because you care an idea, because you take ownership of the project. And when you do that, you don't let bugs or the defects go into production. Interest is very related to curiosity. And remember that curiosity is the right mindset for learning. Actually, let me show you this. Ajis is responding to the previous comment from Indirect. And he's showing interest with the word interest. He has a positive comment. And I guarantee you that after taking on that task, he learned something. The next positive emotion that I want to describe is gratitude. Gratitude makes others feel good. acknowledge the words of someone else, and helps you build a stronger relationship with your team. It has been proven that gratitude is just the most effective way to be more positive. So be grateful today for one thing, and your brain will remember it. Be grateful tomorrow for something else, and your brain will remember it. Let's see an example. Here, Senor Rocha is being thankful for something that someone else in the community did. He's using the word contribution to actually acknowledge work. And the score is very high. But I think the score should be higher. Why? Because he's using emoji. So I think we can use emoji to enhance our positive attitudes. So please use more emojis. So my definition of positive feedback is the process of providing reinforcements or suggestions while using our positive attitudes or feedback. Why do we care about giving feedback? I think there are mainly two reasons. One of them is to reinforce a behavior, to show that you saw that someone did something good, and you want them to keep doing it. The other reason is because you want them to improve, or because you care about the output, that you want to improve the output. And if you add positivity to that, you'll get positive reinforcement and positive constructive feedback. And I want to say this, that because a lot of people think that being positive is only about positive reinforcement. But I think that giving positive feedback when you are trying to help someone to improve, and when you are trying to make someone to do something better, it's very important to give positive feedback. I want to tell you that I think there are two extremes of positive feedback in general. On one extreme, it's something like I described what happened with my peer. People are aggressive or negative. But in the other extreme, there is not enough feedback, or their ideas are not expressed well enough. And I want to share a story of that situation that happened. I met this enthusiastic developer. He was amazing. He built features in the matter of hours. But he was a junior developer. Best practices. So, didn't know all the best practices, so he started writing code that sometimes was not well tested. And we were okay with some of those things. But sooner or later, what happened was that some of his code made it into production, and it didn't have a test, and it broke something. It caused a bug. And of course, the bug was something bad. But I think that the biggest issue was that our team didn't communicate the expectations that we had in terms of quality code, of test coverage. And as soon as we talked with our peer, and we told him what were the expectations, and we gave him tools to help him analyze the test coverage or find where the complexity was in his code, he just started writing better code right away. So we realized that we had to do something, but we probably could have done it before. So this is one of the extremes of feedback that I was talking about. Our team failed to be assertive. So what is assertiveness? Assertiveness is the quality of being self-assured and confident without being aggressive. And I think it's a very important skill to give feedback. And I have good news, everyone. Assertiveness is a skill that you can learn. I actually have been learning how to be more assertive during the last years. And I want to share some tips that have helped me to be more assertive. The first one is you have to practice. And I practice every time I can. I try to speak loud and clear. And one of the things that I notice is that my volume increases. And one of the other benefits that I notice is that now that I go to my favorite coffee shop, I get a coffee for Enrique, not for Jerry, Rick, Ricardo, or some other name. I get my coffee with my name. The other thing is that you have to be patient. Sometimes when I'm in a meeting and my thought is not ready, I just raise my hand. And if I know I can come up with the answer right away, I just ask for a moment. But if I'm not ready, I ask my team to come back later. And if you're in a pair programming session, one thing that has worked very well for me is just add a comment right there. And if you are going to commit and you still have that comment, you'll remember to go back and talk with your pair about it. The next thing is that you have to be open and honest. One of my managers told me that bad news don't improve with time. And talking about the enthusiastic developer, we knew we had an issue, but we didn't communicate that issue. And it didn't improve with time. The next one is don't worry about the small things. I think that assertive people are very good at making compromises, especially in the small things. They're very good at letting things go. I think that at some point, let's go is going to be as powerful as let it be. One of the tools that I use to be more assertive is iMessages. No, they're not related to Apple. iMessages are a technique that I use to be more assertive, and they're called iMessages because they start with I. And the idea is that you say your opinions and your feelings, and you focus the responsibility of those, your opinions and your feelings, on you. And you avoid putting the other person in defensive mode. Let's look at an example. I think this method is very complex. Or I feel it could reduce the complexity. And of course, as soon as I talk about iMessages with my team, someone said, one of the things I think you do very well and constantly is fail fast. Don't be like that. Focus on the code, not on the author. And try to avoid being critic of the author of the code. iMessages are great for expressing your ideas. But what if instead of suggesting a course of action, you want to start a conversation? I think that finding the right question or finding the right way to start a conversation is something really hard. And I want to share a story that happened to me while I was learning this. I was working with another junior developer, and we were working on some stories that require a simple mapping, solving a simple mapping problem. Back then, we were not using scripting language, so I suggested that the cleanest way to solve that problem would be to use a hash table. And each of us went our separate ways, and it was not until the next day, after a code review, that I found out that my peer, he didn't use a hash table. He was using an array and doing some search magic to find the results. So after that, I walked and asked directly to my peer, why did you not use a hash table? And he just told me, well, to be honest, I don't know what a hash table is. And I think that if I had asked the right question, if I had the right context, if I had not made the assumption that he knew what a hash table was, I think that we could have a more productive session. So I want to share with you a tip that I learned while I was volunteering at Railsbridge. Assume that anyone you're helping has zero knowledge, but infinite intelligence. how might we use this advice to ask the right question? I think that I could have asked something like, what do you think is the best way to solve this problem? Or what do you think would be the right way to approach it? And if after a while we haven't solved the problem, then I would have suggested, have you used hash tables before? I think that questions are a key part to understand the person, because you don't know where the person is coming from. You don't know the entire history of that person. You also need to learn about the context. And you also have to ask questions about the ideas that you are behind. And this is a tool that will allow you to learn from new ideas. In our community, as product managers, designers, engineers, I think that it's very important that we use positive feedback to create environments in which we can ask questions and start conversations. And once we have opened the channels of communications, we will be able to learn, to teach, to grow. So allow me to invite you that the next time you're going to review a pull request, go with the idea that you're going to share knowledge, but also that you want to learn something. And remember that positive feedback can help you build awesome products and awesome software. Questions, comments, complaints? No question? Who had my question? Yes. All right. So the question was, if you're not a senior in the team, how can you help to promote positive feedback? I think that positive feedback, it's everywhere, and you can do it everywhere, no matter if you are just learning or if you're already an experienced developer. And I think that is just by asking questions, but by trying to learn from your peers. And I think that if you are candid when you're asking questions, I think that will help a lot. Yes? So the question was, how do you give positive feedback to a person who is giving negative feedback? I think that an important reason could be to try to understand if that person is giving negative feedback because if something is happening with him or with her, like if it's just, there's something that is bothering that person. And if there is, like if there is something that you can do to remove that barrier. And of course, there are people who always will give negative feedback no matter what happens. But I think that the only way to solve that, it would be to try to ask more questions or try to be nice. Even if you're not getting positive feedback, I think that the good will always win, or that's what I want to hope. Thank you very much for having me.